He's joining us on the line right now. He is Kaleida Health President and CEO. He's been in that role since 2014. He led the planning, financing, and construction of the Oshad Children's Hospital. Kaleida, of course, a proud partner of the Bills, title sponsor for One Bills Live. We're happy to have Jody Lomeo on the line with us right now. Hi, Jody. It's John Murphy and Steve Tasker here in Buffalo. How you doing?
Hey, guys. How you doing? You hanging in there?
Doing great. Thanks for coming on, Jody.
I know there's a lot of serious stuff to talk about, but I saw this little note in a bio. I didn't realize this, and this is not serious at all. You were an intern with former Bills GM John Butler at one point. Is that right?
It's true. Yeah, that is true. That was 90. Steve was there too. So that was when it was going into the fall of 90. It was the J.D. Williams, Carwell Gardner draft. I got great memories from that, working with late great Mr. Butler and Bill Polian, and I mean it was a who's who back then, and Jim and the boys and Steve, and I was a young little guy, a lot more hair, much thinner. You know what I'm talking about, right?
I know what you're talking about. That's a great time to be around it. Were you pre-draft? Is that when you were doing your internship? Was it before they drafted those guys?
I actually was pre-draft. And I actually worked the draft room, and Murph, I don't know if you remember this. I think Steve might. The walls were magnetic back then.
Oh yeah.
And I had the job of actually taking the names, which were on magnets, and moving them as people were being picked.
Yep.
But the really kind of cool thing for back then, what was I, 22 years old? The really cool thing back then was who was in the room, which was Marv and Mr. Butler and Bob Ferguson and Ralph Wilson and Bill Polian and so on. A.J. Smith, I could name them all.
Hey, I have one more question about this, and it's have you been to the Bills new, and I'd say new, it's like 3 years old now, the new draft setup? Have you ever been in there around draft time?
I have. I actually, and I could talk about it now, I was actually one of the only people invited into the Sammy Watkins draft. My son Vinny and I actually were in that room. I don't want anybody to hold it against me.
I was going to say we can blame you about that.
but you want to know the funny part? So everybody knew the story of me, what I used to do, picking the names off the walls. And when they made the trade for Sammy Watkins, I actually took his name off the wall in the draft room. Doug Whaley.
You're the one.
Yeah. So.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you, and since your internship, there's been a lot of water under the bridge.
I'm coming clean with everything now.
And now you're the president CEO of Kaleida Health. What's the latest? You can tell us about the update with the environment we're all living in.
Well, thanks for having me. And I think it's really important, for all of us that we continue to do the things that we keep talking about and being compliant. And look, this is, I've said this, and you see what's going on TV and the updates with whether it's the county executive or the governor or whomever. This is really serious. And so let me take you through what's really, really important here. It's really critically important that we keep our healthcare workforce safe and healthy. They are more than willing, incredibly dedicated. They're the best of the best. However, we got to keep them healthy to take care of us. So we haven't seen that major surge that you see in New York City. And guys, that's real. What's going on in New York City is real. It's dire. It's almost hard to believe. I'm on the phone at least a couple of times a day with colleagues from New York, fellow CEOs and the like, and it's really troubling what's going on there. People are literally dying. So what can we do? We just all have to do our part, and that's why I was kind of wanted to come on today. And do our part is all those things that you've been hearing about, which is social distancing, washing your hands, and just stay at home if you can. And look, I got 3 teenage boys. I know how difficult this is for everybody. But if we don't do it, we will absolutely have this around for months and months and months. If we do it, we can mitigate it.
Jody, I got another thing too. Tell us a little bit about maybe the supplies that you're running short of, or maybe some of the other things that are problems right now that maybe we can get out ahead of.
Yeah, and the community's, thanks, Steve. The community's been really generous with us, and that message is across. So you got to think about this. This is really the first time in my memory that I could think of where an entire nation is searching for the same thing. And then you start to think about the whole globe is searching for masks, the right kind of masks, ventilators, protective gear. You hear PPE, personal protective equipment. We're all searching for it. We're all running low. We seem to right now, we talk about Kaleida Health, feel like we're in a decent spot. Right now, we need as much as we can get. We're working every angle. Lots of community partners have stepped up. But that's really going to give our community comfort, and really more importantly, it's going to give our internal staff comfort. We just went to universal masking. So every individual in our hospitals now has a mask on. So that gives them comfort. It gives them confidence, and they can do what they do best.
With Jody Lomeo, CEO of Kaleida Health. Hey, Jody, I've heard the governor say this a couple of days about how what is happening in New York City, the surge in New York City is bound to happen around the country. Is that the case? I mean, can we anticipate that sort of impact here in Western New York, would you think?
Well, here's the thing. He's really firing a warning shot, John, and
right.
And I think he's right, and I'll tell you why. Now, if we do, will we see it at the absolute level that they are? I don't know that. Hopefully not. The problem in New York, I mean, you all know this, and the listeners know this. It's the density of New York.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're talking about mass transit. You're talking about people on top of people constantly. And so for us, as difficult as this is, when you talk about social distancing, it is much easier here. But they are getting overrun. Now, whether we see the wave or not, now our models talk about somewhere between the next 14 to 21 days, it could get really, really hot and heavy here on this stuff. So we shall see. Here's the current situation, what we're seeing. Each and every day, we're seeing more come in. So I wouldn't say we're at a point where we're seeing so many that we're overrun, but at the pace we're on, we're seeing more and more. So the trend isn't great, but I am concerned that if it does turn into a New York City situation, then, we will be overrun as a healthcare system.
Hey, Jody, I read a story in New York Times this morning about a fairly sizable hospital in Brooklyn. It was just kind of a first-person account from an employee there, of several employees really, like what it's like there. And it's something like a war zone. How are your nurses and doctors and everybody else doing? How are they holding up under the strain?
Yeah, so there you go. That story, I know what story you're referring to. It really is true, and so they're under incredible stress. One other stress that we haven't talked about is the staffing issue. So as more and more of the caregivers get sick, the staffing levels and the pressure on individuals inside the hospital get more and more. So that's really true. So from a Kaleida perspective in our facilities, yes, we've had employees who are positive. The spread is throughout the community. They're nervous, and naturally so. But the really good thing about it, and the part that I keep hanging my head on, and all the praise goes to all of the nurses and physicians and support staff, is they just want to take care of people. And so we just have to keep them healthy. I keep repeating myself, but it's just the truth. So morale's not what it is normally. But, there is a sense of, we got this. There's a sense of confidence, but we just got to keep supporting them and keeping them healthy.
Jody, I got to ask you one thing, too. Is there anything, can you give us maybe a best case scenario for what we can see in the next week to 10 days, and maybe a worst case if all this doesn't go well? What are the range of possibilities the general public is looking at for the environment and how it will change from what it is today?
Yeah, I think, Steve, worst case, keep looking towards New York. Keep looking at the hospitals getting busier and busier and the ICU capacity going down. Because that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about the sickest individuals. And when you look at the percentages and you start to talk about it, whether 50% or 40% of all of us get it, 15% roughly would have to be hospitalized. That's what the kind of the rate is now. Of that 15%, 5% would be in ICUs. And that's where it gets really, really kind of scary, because what we don't want to have is our ICUs packed with very, very sick people because, as you all know, there's not a cure for this right now. There's not a vaccine. There's not anything we can do. So that goes back to just kind of all of us playing our part. On a best-case scenario is you won't see that. We'll see what we're seeing now, which is manageable, and you'll see they keep talking about the curve being flattened or going down. That's what you'll start to see, and that's what we're hopeful for. But, I mean, Steve, hope isn't a strategy. So what we're doing is we're preparing for the worst, hoping for the best.
That's what they used to say when Hank Butler was coaching the Bills. Hope is not a strategy, I think.
Hey, what was it? The wind out of my sails, or the sails out of my
right. Hey, Jody, you know, been watching too much TV the last couple of weeks, and the last week or so, I see you up on television, and your message for the community at large is pretty simple, but really important, isn't it?
That's it, and that, you know, and we made that decision, you know, about maybe a week to 10 days ago, that we just really got to get out there preaching our own behaviors. So, guys, it's what we can control right now. We can't control what's going on in New York City. We can't control what's going on in the economy for the most part. What we can control is what we do each and every day. And people have said, well, what can I do to help? Well, what you can do to help is be compliant. Okay, so if we're all compliant and we're all doing this, and it's, believe me, I know I can't sit still, but it's tough. But we just have to do it. And if we do it, we'll get out of this thing. If we don't do it, it's going to be a long, long marathon.
Jody, thanks so much for coming and joining us. We wish you all the best. We know that Collide is working hard for all of us in this situation, and we hope that we can stay informed and help the people who listen to us do the right thing with the advice of the people in your industry. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Stay healthy.
All right. Jody Lomeo, CEO of Collide Health, on the line with us about the serious coronavirus and the precautions being taken. And